The night my brother got engaged, my mother handed me a bill I never agreed to pay. I didn't see it coming. Nobody does, I think, when it's your own family standing across from you with a smile on their face while they're doing it. Let me back up. My name is Serena. I'm 31 years old, I work in healthcare administration, and 3 years ago I bought a house. A real house. Not a condo, not a starter townhome shared with a roommate, a 3-bedroom colonial in a suburb outside of Columbus, Ohio. I saved for 6 years to make that down payment happen. I packed my lunch every single day. I drove a car with 140,000 miles on it until the transmission gave out. I said no to vacations, no to nights out, no to things I genuinely wanted, because I wanted that house more. The day I signed the closing documents, I sat in my car in the parking lot of the title company and cried. Not sad crying. The kind of crying that comes out of you when something you've been carrying for a long time finally gets to be set down. That house was mine. Every single square foot of it. About 8 months after I moved in, my parents called me. This wasn't unusual. We talked a few times a week, always had. But this call had a different energy to it. My mother did most of the talking, which also wasn't unusual. She told me that she and my father were struggling. Their landlord had decided not to renew their lease. They had 60 days to find somewhere new, and in their area, rents had gone up significantly. My dad was on a fixed retirement income. My mom worked part-time at a dentist's office, but it cut her hours down after some health issues the previous year. They needed help. I want to be clear about something. I love my parents. I know that gets complicated in stories like this, but it's true. They weren't monsters. They raised me and my younger brother Marcus in a home where we never went without the things we needed. My dad coached my soccer team 3 seasons in a row, even when his back hurt. My mom drove 4 hours round trip to see me graduate college. They weren't bad people, but they had a way, sometimes, of assuming that love was the same thing as obligation, and that my resources, my time, my savings, my credit, my house, existed inside a kind of family commons that anyone could draw from when they needed it. I said yes. Of course I said yes. But I wasn't careless about it. I sat down with them on a Sunday afternoon at my kitchen table with a legal pad and we talked through the terms. They would move into my house. They would have the entire first floor, the master bedroom, the attached bathroom, the den. I would move up to the second floor. In exchange, they would cover my monthly mortgage payment. The number at the time was $1,480. They'd also cover their share of the utilities. I waived any additional rent because they were my parents, and I wasn't trying to profit off them. I just needed the mortgage covered so I wasn't losing money on a house I owned. We shook hands. My mother hugged me and said she didn't know what she'd do without me. My father looked relieved in a way that made me feel good about the decision. I drafted a simple written agreement, nothing fancy. I'm not a lawyer, but specific enough. Mortgage payment due by the 1st of each month. Utilities split. No unauthorized guests staying longer than a week without discussion. I gave them a copy. I kept a copy. Everyone signed. For about 14 months, it worked. The payments came in on time. We had our routines. They cooked on Sundays sometimes and we'd all eat together. My dad fixed the fence in the backyard without being asked. It wasn't perfect. Living with your parents in your 30s never is, but it was functional. It felt like an arrangement that was working for everyone. Then Marcus got engaged. His girlfriend's name was Kayla. She was perfectly nice. I want to say that too, because she's mostly irrelevant to what happened, and I don't want to paint her as a villain when she was largely just a bystander. The engagement wasn't a surprise. They'd been together 4 years. My parents were thrilled. The engagement party was held at my aunt and uncle's house about 6 weeks after Marcus proposed. It was a Saturday evening in late October. One of those nights where it's cold enough to need a jacket, but the sky does something beautiful right at sunset that makes everything feel a little cinematic. There were probably 40 people there. Extended family, Marcus and Kayla's friends, neighbors my parents had known for decades. I drove separately. I remember that detail because I almost didn't go. I had a headache starting behind my eyes that afternoon and I thought about calling and saying I wasn't feeling well. I went anyway because he was my brother and I wasn't going to miss his engagement party over a headache. I should have stayed home. The evening was going fine. I was standing near the kitchen talking to my cousin about her new job when I heard my mother's voice rise above the general noise of the room. She had that particular tone she uses when she wants to make an announcement, slightly louder than necessary, with a quality to it that signals she expects the conversation to stop and the attention to shift toward her. I turned around. She was standing near the fireplace. My father was next to her. Marcus and Kayla were a few feet away. The room had gotten quieter. "We just want everyone to know," my mother said, "how grateful we are that our family has come together for this. And we have some exciting news. Marcus and Kayla are going to be able to really start their lives together with some breathing room, because Serena has agreed to take over our housing costs, so we can redirect that money toward helping them get established." She smiled at me from across the room. The proud smile. The one that assumes credit for something you made possible. 40 people looked at me. I had agreed to no such thing. Let me tell you what it feels like to have your financial future renegotiated on your behalf, in public, with an audience of 40 people watching your face to see how you react. It feels like the floor has dropped 2 inches and you're the only one who noticed. Everything continues around you. Someone coughs, a glass clinks, a child says something to its parent, and you're standing there doing the math in real time. If my parents stopped covering the mortgage, that was $1,480 a month coming out of my pocket. For a house they were living in, while they redirected their money toward my brother's new life. I didn't say anything. Not yet. This is the part that people find frustrating when I tell this story. Several people have said to me, "Why didn't you just say something right then?" And I understand that instinct. I've asked myself that question too. Here's the honest answer: I froze. Not because I was afraid of conflict, not because I was a pushover, but because I was genuinely blindsided to the point where my brain needed a few seconds to confirm that what I'd just heard was what I'd actually heard. I kept waiting for the follow-up, the "just kidding," the "we talked to Serena about this earlier," something that would resolve the dissonance between what my mother had just said and the reality I was living in. It didn't come. What came instead was my aunt, my mother's sister, standing on the other side of the room, who raised her glass and said, "That's so beautiful. You girls are lucky to have a daughter like that." And then conversation resumed. The party moved on. My mother drifted toward Kayla's family. My father got himself another drink. Marcus caught my eye from across the room and gave me a look I couldn't read, somewhere between apologetic and expectant, like he wasn't sure which direction this was going to go. I set my glass down on the nearest surface and excused myself to the bathroom. I sat on the closed toilet lid for 6 minutes. I know because I watched the time on my phone. I was doing something I learned to do in high school when anxiety would spike before exams. Slow, deliberate breathing, in for 4 counts, out for 4 counts, until the noise in my head got quiet enough that I could think. What I was thinking was, I need more information before I respond. Because if I walk out there and say what I'm feeling right now in front of 40 people at my brother's engagement party, it becomes a scene. It becomes the story. Serena ruined Marcus's engagement party. That narrative would live in this family for 20 years. I wasn't going to give it the chance to take root. So I went back out. I was civil for the rest of the evening. I hugged Marcus. I told Kayla congratulations. I ate the appetizers. I drove home. And I started paying attention. What I found over the next 3 weeks was worse than the announcement. I had 2 credit cards that I rarely used, both with low balances, both with autopay set up, both with my parents listed as authorized users. I'd added them years before when my father had a medical scare and I wanted them to have access to something in an emergency. I hadn't thought much about them since. I pulled up both accounts. The first card had $20,040 in new charges, restaurants, a furniture store, a weekend at a hotel in Cincinnati I had no knowledge of, a florist. The second card had $1,000 in Cincinnati I had no knowledge of, a florist. The second card had $1,899. More restaurants, what appeared to be catering deposits, a rental company, party supply stores, over $4,000, charged without a conversation, without a text, without a heads up of any kind. In the week since the engagement party, I sat at my kitchen table at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday night and I looked at those statements for a long time. There's a specific kind of hurt that comes from realizing someone has been counting on your not looking, that they made a calculation, conscious or not, that your trust was something they could spend, that they looked at the access you gave them in good faith and saw a resource rather than a responsibility. I didn't confront them that night. I needed to be deliberate. I needed to have everything in order before I said a word, because once I said it, things were going to change, and I wanted to make sure I'd done everything I needed to do first. Over the next 10 days, I did the following things. I called my mortgage company and confirmed the account, the payoff information, and my rights as the sole owner of the property. I pulled up my original purchase documents and confirmed that the deed was in my name alone. It had always been, and no one had ever had any claim on the property besides me. I spoke with a tenant's rights attorney for 30 minutes over the phone, explained the situation, and confirmed the steps I needed to take to issue a formal notice to vacate. In Ohio, for a month-to-month arrangement with no formal lease, the required notice is 30 days. I drafted that notice. I also removed my parents as authorized users on both credit cards, disputed the charges I had no knowledge of, and froze both accounts while the disputes were processed. Then I opened a new credit card account entirely, set up in my name only, with a strong password and two-factor authentication. Two things I'd been sloppy about before. I did not tell anyone I was doing any of this. The first of the month came, the date by which my parents were supposed to transfer the mortgage payment. It didn't come. I checked my account 4 times that day. Nothing. I waited 3 more days. Still nothing. On a Thursday evening, I went downstairs and knocked on the door of what had been the master bedroom. My mother opened it. My father was watching television inside. They both looked at me with the mild, slightly defensive expression of people who've been waiting for a conversation and aren't entirely sure what shape it's going to take. I asked my mother, calmly, why the mortgage payment hadn't been made. She said, and I want to get this right because the exact wording matters. She said, "We talked about this at Marcus's party, Serena. You said you'd handle the housing so we could help the kids out. We already told Kayla's parents." I looked at her for a moment. "I didn't say that," I said. "You said that, in front of 40 people, without asking me." My father said that family takes care of family. He said it in his reasonable voice, the one he uses when he's trying to reframe something as a principle rather than a request. I said, "I agree. And I've been taking care of this family for over a year. But the arrangement we agreed to, in writing, was that you cover the mortgage in exchange for living here. That arrangement hasn't changed. I didn't agree to anything at that party." My mother's expression shifted. "Serena, we already committed to helping Marcus and Kayla. We can't take that back. You have good income. You can handle the mortgage." "Maybe," I said. "But that's not what we agreed to. And I found the credit card charges." Silence. I let it sit there for a moment. I didn't fill it. My father said it was an emergency, that they'd intended to tell me, that they were going to pay it back. I said I understood, and that I'd already removed them from those accounts and disputed the charges, and that if they wanted to discuss reimbursement, they were welcome to. Then I told them about the notice. I took it out of the folder I was holding and set it on the small table near the door. 30 days. Formal. Signed by me, witnessed by my neighbor, the same woman who's been on my emergency contact list since I moved in. My mother said, "You can't be serious." I said, "The notice gives you 30 days. That's actually generous given the circumstances. I'll help you look for options if you like, but this arrangement is over." My father stood up. He's a big man. Not threatening, but the kind of presence that used to feel imposing when I was small. He said that I was throwing my own parents out on the street. He said that no daughter of his had ever treated them this way. He said things that I'm not going to repeat because I've already spent enough time hearing them in my head. I said, "I'm not throwing you out tonight. I'm giving you 30 days. That's what I'm legally required to do, and it's what I'm giving you. I'd encourage you to start making calls tomorrow." I went back upstairs. I knew what was coming. I've known my family long enough to know the architecture of these situations. Within 24 hours, the calls started. My aunt, the one who'd raised her glass and called them lucky, left me a voicemail saying she couldn't believe I was doing this to my parents at their age. My cousin texted me a paragraph about family loyalty. A family friend I hadn't spoken to in 3 years somehow had my number and used it. Marcus called. This conversation was harder than any of the others. He's my brother. We grew up sharing a bathroom and a backseat and a general understanding of what our family was and wasn't. When he called, I picked up, which I hadn't done for anyone else. He said he hadn't known about the credit cards. I believed him. He said he was sorry about the party, that he'd told our mother it wasn't her place to make that announcement, that he'd said something to her about it privately. I appreciated that, and I told him so. Then he said, "But Serena, where are they going to go?" I said, "That's the question they should have been asking themselves before they stopped paying and started spending." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I know. I know you're right. I feel responsible." "You're not," I said. "This isn't about you. Your engagement is a good thing. What they did with it isn't your fault." He asked if there was any version of this where they could stay. I said there wasn't. Not with the current situation. Not without a complete restructuring that, frankly, I didn't trust anymore. The foundation of the arrangement had been good faith. And good faith had been used against me. He said he understood. We stayed on the phone for a few more minutes, not really saying much. Before he hung up, he said, "I love you, Serena." I said it back. I meant it. I still do. To the people who called, sent texts, left voicemails, I responded to exactly none of them for the first 2 weeks. Not out of spite, because I had nothing to say to any of them that would be useful. When my aunt called a second time, I picked up and I told her something that had been sitting in my chest since the night of that party. If you feel strongly that they need support, I would genuinely welcome you stepping in. They need somewhere to go. If you can provide that, you would be doing a real and meaningful thing. But what I'm not able to do is continue an arrangement that was violated, on top of unauthorized charges to my accounts, because nobody wants an uncomfortable conversation. She did not offer to take them in. Nobody did. My parents found a senior apartment complex about 20 minutes from their old neighborhood, a 2-bedroom, income-based rent with amenities and other residents their age. My mother called to tell me about it with a flatness in her voice that I recognized as the sound of someone who has stopped being angry and started being practical, which in my family is sometimes the closest thing to progress you're going to get. They moved out on day 26, 4 days ahead of the deadline. I stood in the empty first floor of my house the evening after they left. The walls had small marks where frames had been. The carpet near the window had an indent from a chair. It smelled like their laundry detergent still, just faintly. I felt more than one thing at once. I want to be honest about that. I felt the particular quiet of a house that's entirely yours again. I also felt the specific ache of knowing that something between you and your parents has been rearranged in a permanent way, and you can't unknow that. I called Marcus and told him they were out. He said he knew. He'd helped them with the moving truck. He sounded tired. I didn't push it. That was 4 months ago. My parents and I talk occasionally now. Not like before, but not at all. My mother has not apologized. My father has not apologized. My father has not apologized. What they've done instead is proceed forward into their new life, as if the whole thing was a weather event that happened and is now over. I'm not sure that's the worst possible outcome, honestly. I'm not sure what an apology would change, practically speaking. What I know is that my mortgage is being paid on time, that the accounts are secured, that the house that I worked 6 years to be able to buy is mine in the way it always was. Uncomplicated. With my name on the deed and no one else's assumptions living inside it. Marcus and Kayla are getting married in June. I'm invited. I'm going to go because he is my brother and because the thing between me and my parents doesn't have to be the thing between me and him. I already bought a dress. It's green, which is not a color I usually wear. But Kayla asked the women in the wedding party to wear something in the family of Emerald, and I thought, why not? It's a wedding. It's supposed to be something. I will not be paying for any of it. If anyone at that wedding makes an announcement about my finances, I will respond in real time. I've thought about that possibility and made peace with it. The version of me that sat on a bathroom floor counting her breaths for 6 minutes has done a lot of work over the past few months. She does not need 40 seconds to respond anymore. She knows what she owns, what she agreed to, and where the line is. She also knows how to be kind while holding it. I hope she gets to be both things at that wedding. I think she will. I've thought a lot about cause and effect since all of this happened. Not in some abstract philosophical way, just in the very practical way that you think about things when you're sitting alone in a house that finally feels like yours again, trying to make sense of how you got here. The thing is, nothing that happened was actually sudden. That's what I keep coming back to. My mother didn't wake up the morning of that engagement party and decide to rearrange my finances in front of 40 people on a whim. That announcement was built on a foundation of smaller moments. Moments where I said yes without being asked, where I smoothed things over instead of naming them, where I let an assumption go uncorrected because correcting it felt harder than absorbing it. I didn't cause what they did, but I had spent years making it very easy for them to believe it would work. There's a version of myself I used to be that would have found a way to make it work anyway. She would have stretched her budget, swallowed the resentment, told herself it was what families do. She would have called it love. And it would have looked like love from the outside, for a while, right up until it didn't anymore. Right up until there was nothing left to give. And everyone was angry, and nobody could quite explain how it had gotten so bad. What I learned, the hard way, and then the slow way, is that clarity is not cruelty. When I handed my parents that 30-day notice, I wasn't punishing them. I was finally being honest about what I'd agreed to, about what I hadn't, about what I was and wasn't willing to absorb. That honesty cost something. It cost the particular comfort of being the daughter who never makes things difficult. It cost a version of the relationship I'd had with my parents that, if I'm being real with myself, had already been quietly costing me for years. Serena, the version of her who sat on a bathroom floor counting her breaths, who pulled up credit card statements at 11 at night, who drafted a legal notice with shaking hands, she didn't act out of anger. She acted out of clarity, and I think that distinction matters more than most people realize. Anger burns fast and leaves a mess. Clarity is slower. It requires you to know what you actually value, what you actually agreed to, and what you're actually willing to protect. It requires intelligence, not the kind you get from a degree, but the kind you build from paying attention to your own life. The resilience part came after. It came in the form of Marcus calling and me picking up. It came in the form of buying a green dress for a wedding I almost talked myself out of attending. It came in understanding that the situation with my parents didn't have to define every relationship in my family, and that choosing to show up for my brother on his wedding day was its own kind of strength, separate from, and not contradicted by, the boundary I'd drawn with the people who raised us both. I don't think the people who love us are always entitled to everything we have. I don't think love, even real love, cancels out the terms of an agreement. And I don't think staying silent to keep the peace is the same thing as keeping the peace. Sometimes the most decent thing you can do, for yourself and, honestly, for the people pushing against you, is to say, clearly and without drama, where the line actually is. That's what I did. And the house is quiet now, in the best possible way.